Good morning, everyone, and good evening in India and Europe. Pranayama, what is it and why is it important as part of yoga asanas? What does science and research say? We will explore this topic with one of the top yoga researchers in the world, Dr. Apar Avinash Saoji. Dr. Apar is a deputy director and associate professor of a well known yoga institute in India. He has done his PhD in the physiological effects of pranayama. He is an educator, researcher, and clinician specializing in yoga therapy, naturopathy, and acupuncture. I am Amita from Nourish Talk, a global platform for natural and holistic therapies. I'd like to introduce all of you to Dr. Apar Avinash Saoji. Welcome, Dr. Apar.
Thank you, Amita. Thank you for that generous introduction. I am definitely not one of the topmost yoga researchers, but yeah, I'm doing my bit. And yes, research is something that I'm really passionate about. And something that we have really done is yoga research, especially something that I love talking about is pranayama because I've done some amount of work of research, and I've seen it working for a lot of people, including myself.
No, absolutely. And interestingly, we had a talk before you and with a with a yoga counselor and Ayurveda
Mhm.
counselor, and she works in the hospital in US, and she was citing all the research how the simple things like breathing can foster positive thoughts. So this is really interesting for you to,
Absolutely.
yes, to educate us the basic concepts of pranayama. So
Mhm.
let's get started, please.
Yeah, I think in the traditional understanding of yoga, we talk of 8 different limbs of the yoga practices. It starts with the basic fundamental rules and regulations called as yama and niyama. These are do's and don'ts when a practitioner is trying to walk in the path of yoga. Unlike what usually is perceived of yoga, that it is just the bending of the body and the acrobatics, there is a lot more to it. The asana is the third part, which is typically very popular across the world, where we are talking of the physical postures that are in yoga. The fourth limb is pranayama, and that is talking about regulating the vital force. I'll just come to that once we complete the remaining uh, limbs of yoga, which is pratyahara, which is withdrawing my senses and going inwards. Typically, my senses push me outwards. And therefore, if I want to go inwards, and that is the journey that in the path of yoga that we want to do, yoga is all about going in, all right? And that is where, the transformation of a person would start when you start withdrawing your senses and looking inwards. And then there are the processes of intense focusing, which is called dharana, meditation, which is dhyana, and a complete absorption, which is samadhi. So this whole journey of yoga is to attain, a state of self-realization or complete absorption. But these processes, all these steps that we're talking about, are essentially the part and parcel of the journey of yoga. Now, coming to what we are about to talk today a lot more about is pranayama. Now, this is a word that is made of two Sanskrit words, prana, which essentially means life force. Okay. The oxygen is called as prana vayu in the Indian context, where we understand that, the life depends on that uh, matter. So, prana is the life force that allows you to have the entire living being. And ayama, you know, is to regulate. Now, you will live a life, you know, if you're born, you will live till you die. But can you take conscious control on the processes that happen when we are living? Is the whole science of pranayama is all about. And that is exactly what we translate the word pranayama as, the regulation of the life force that regulates each and every process that happens in our body. That is all about, you know, briefly talking about what pranayama is.
Okay, so let's talk about the concept of Pancha Kosha. How is that important in relation to the pranayama?
Well, again, in the yogic wisdom, what we understand, and this particular concept comes from one of the scriptures called Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a very ancient text, about 5,000 years old. Now it talks, that you are not just this physical body. There is a lot more to your personality. Okay, and what is it? I'll give you a very simple example. When somebody says you are Amita, of course, they would remember your physique as the first thing. The way you walk, the way you talk, the way you gesture is the first thing that comes in anybody's mind, and that physical body is sustained by food. Okay, so what is being explained is, we are born of food, we are sustained by food, and once we, are at the end of our lives, we go back to food. Our body decomposes and goes back to the nature, becoming soil. So that is the physical body, also called as the Annamaya Kosha. Okay, Anna means food, and that is what is the concept there. But now, uh, you know, a dead body also has a physical body, but it does
That's
not
right.
have life, right? So the life, without life, you are not what you are. Okay, nobody would start calling you as Amita or Apar once we are dead. They would simply call it's a dead body, right? So
That's right.
your identity is lost if you lose your life, and that sheath of our existence is the sheath of prana, the vital force, the life force that sustains us, that makes sure that we survive. So that is what we will be dealing in much more details as we go along with the practice of pranayama further. But then somebody in coma has a body, also has life, but does not have mind. And he's not the same person that he or she was before he or she got in coma. you know so mind is another most important aspect of our personality. So that is called as the manas, or the mind, or chitta. And yoga is all about regulating or controlling this level of our existence, because these are the levels where conflicts are there, stress is there, the emotions are dominant. So mind is something where we need to really work on to take charge of our lives. But then beyond the mind, there is also the sheath of intellect. All of us have the faculty of reasoning, intelligence, and that is always greater than the emotions. Just to give you a simple example, probably all smokers know that smoking is bad, but their mind forces them. The urge to smoke is always there. So there is this subtle difference between the intellect and the mind. And at the end, what we talk is, why do we live? What is the cause of our existence? We all do everything that we do to be happy. Okay, we want to be happy. You want to serve people by doing social service, or entrepreneurship, or anything. That is because you get satisfied if you help people. If you want to earn money, again, it is to make sure that you remain comfortable. So at the end of the day, we do everything that we do to be happy, and that is what is the cause of our existence, which is represented by the Anandamaya Kosha, which is the causal state of human existence. So our personality is always the interplay between all these sheets. Okay, and without one, the other will not really be as it would otherwise be. And therefore, there has to be absolute balance that we need to achieve through Pancha Kosha if we really want to live healthy, live happy, live comfortable in our lives.
Okay, all right, moving on. Let's just start with what exactly is prana in respect to how it's conceptualized within the yoga.
Well, prana, again, the concept is being spoken from the most ancient texts that are available to mankind called as Vedas. And Vedas basically mean knowledge. Okay. So these ancient texts tell us that all of us have been originated from a life force called as prana. Now, just to give you an example, the science has progressed so much that we can clone, an animal from another animal, or you replicate a cell from another cell. But unfortunately, even today, scientists cannot bring life to a dead cell. So it has to start from a living cell to another living cell. So life has is the basic fundamental reason for everything's existence. So that is exactly what we understand by prana, which is necessary for origin as well as sustenance of life. Now, just probably relating it to us, this is a subtle entity. There are no instruments, there are no MRIs that can actually detect prana. Okay. But then at the level of the physical self, we relate this with breathing. Okay. And we talk of how the breathing is absolutely connected with the way we live our lives. Just probably those two pictures over there in the slide are explaining the same thing. The pet animals, the dogs, they breathe at a very high speed. And when they breathe at a high speed, they live for a very short life. On the other side, there are turtles which breathe at an absolute slow pace. Okay. And when you're breathing at that kind of a slow pace, you live for a very, very long time. Turtles are known to be one of the longest living animals on planet Earth, right? And they breathe at about 1 breath per minute, whereas dogs breathe at a very, very fast pace. Okay. And human beings breathe somewhere in between, and they live a lifespan which is in between the both animals. So that is exactly how you can start relating the concept of prana to how much related it is to your life itself.
That's actually fascinating the way you explained the turtle between the dog. I never thought like it's related to the breathing, but it's fascinating. So let's talk about a little bit about the distribution of prana in our living beings.
Well, in yoga, I mean, these are the concepts that have been explained by the sages from India who went inside, like what I began with, and they realized. Please understand that Ayurveda, the whole thing was written without any experimental laboratory, but they knew exactly how your body is made. Okay, so that was the power that our sages achieved through introspection, through meditation. And through that they also understand that the prana flows in the body just the way we have blood circulating in the body through the blood vessels. There are subtle channels through which the prana flows. They are called as nadis. They can be related to very similar concept in acupuncture where we talk of meridians, and the chi, the vital force flows through that. And wherever, now there are about 72,000 of these channels that are described in the scriptures, but three are considered to be of the most important, uh, most importance. The uh, Ida and Pingala, as you can see in the picture, the pink and the bluish color, they basically coil around our spine. Okay. And they're considered to be, again, the concept of yin and yang in the Chinese medicine, where there is a positive force, there is a negative force, the opposing and complementary forces, right? So that is similar concept with Ida and Pingala. They are opposing forces. The right nostril is considered to be the heating one, okay, and that is called as Surya Nadi, which is the Pingala Nadi. So if you're breathing through the right nostril, you are going to activate your system. Whereas the left nostril is considered to be a cooling one. It is considered to be the Chandra Nadi, the relaxing one. So what is being spoken is we are not just talking of the balance between these two, but when there is a balance, the spiritual growth will happen. Otherwise, whenever there is an imbalance, one force is dominant than the other, what would happen is, there is always this tussle. So when there is a balance between this positive and negative energy, the central channel that is called as Sushumna Nadi, which is of the spiritual significance, opens up, and people gain mastery over their body, over their mind, over the different kinds of functions that we have. So that is what is the concept that is being spoken about the distribution of prana. We also talk about chakras. Chakras are basically the junctions at which these channels meet. Okay. Again, if very grossly I have to translate it in English, it's very difficult actually. These concepts are very subtle, but they are plexus. Okay, just the way we have multiple nerves joining at a particular part, we have brachial plexus, we have lumbar plexus, etc. Similarly, we've got these chakras as the point of huge amount of energy. So once one chakra is activated, certain amount of energy is gained through that. So that is the concept of distribution of prana that we're talking about.
Okay, so I read some research, since you're a researcher, on the research of Om, the word Om, AUM. So
Yeah.
that is like Om. When you say Om many times, it has positive impact on your brain, and that's
Yeah.
your topmost chakra, right? Is that
Yeah,
how?
Sahasrara Chakra. Yes, Sahasrara Chakra. Each of these chakras do have their own syllables. Okay, Om is the one that is represented by the crown, which is a 1,000 petal chakra, and that is the goal of yoga, is to reach your energy from the bottom of your spine to the topmost chakra, and that is where we get liberated. But today we are not really talking about the
Sure.
spiritual benefits and all of that. Of course, there are people who are doing that for the spiritual benefits of yoga, but a lot of us are really interested in, I want to do yoga just because I want to take care of my body. I want to do yoga just because it helps me to calm down my mind. But even that is because we are channelizing our energy in a positive way to a specific location. So that's the concept that we're talking here.
Sure. So let's go deep dive into what exactly is the function of the prana.
Now, function of the prana, basically it controls everything. Life controls everything that happens in your body, or uh, the mind as well. So it is the connect between the mind and body, if we are looking at the subtle aspect of it. But physically, the prana, based on the functions that it performs, it is covered into 5 different kinds of forces. Okay, there is one which is regulating my respiration from, I start breathing from the nose and it goes to my lungs. So this is called as mukha prana, and also otherwise called as just prana. Okay, the reason why I'm specifically mentioning it as mukha prana is because otherwise it will be confused with the whole concept itself. Now, mukha prana is what we regulate through the practice of pranayama. The practice of breathing, when we start regulating, we are going to regulate the prana that is controlling the art or the function of respiration. Then there is one which is called as udana, which controls all the upward activities of the body. Okay, so if there is an imbalance, in the upward activities, there will be excessive belching. We talk of how vomitings could be there. There could also be there can be gastroesophageal. I'm sorry, there is an echo.
Okay.
Is it now correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So
You were talking about the GERD part or something,
yeah.
right?
So yeah. So there can be GERD if there is an imbalance. Okay. The neurological problems, because all the impulses that are going to your brain, if they are not going properly, there can be a problem there. So Udana is the one that controls the upward forces. Similarly, there is something for the downward forces which will control the urination, the defecation, the process of passing stools and all of that. And that is called as apana. It also controls the reproductive functions, etc. There is one in the center which balances the upward and downward forces, and that is called as samana. The word samana also means to balance. Okay, so that acts as a balance between this upward and downward force, and it basically regulates your digestive processes. And then there is one that circulates throughout the body, and that is called as Vyana. Okay, so they are all color coded in the slide there. And what we understand is all the functions in the body are essentially controlled by this distribution of prana. And the concept is that if there is an imbalance in the flow of prana, there will be a health problem. Okay, so even before there is a physical problem, there will always be a prana imbalance at that area. When we are looking at the ayurvedic concept of it also, we talk of how vata is the most important of the three doshas that cause all the diseases. Okay, predominantly in every disease that we're talking about. And therefore vata it means nothing but air, and here we are talking of air regulation of the subtle air. So that's the whole concept that we bring in when we are understanding the functions of prana. And it is very, very important that we have an absolute balance for perfect health.
So I think that's important. So I think why do we do pranayama, and why is it so important in your opinion in yoga practice? So I think your research comes into play.
Well, from the subtle aspects that we spoke about, the Pancha Koshas and the nadis and the Pancha Pranas that we spoke about, let me talk about something very gross and physical. Okay, we breathe right from our first cry as we come out of the mother's womb, which is the first effort to actually breathe for a child. Till somebody dies, we keep breathing, right? The first thing that you would like to check if somebody collapses is the breathing, whether he's alive or not. That is the sign that we have for life. Now, this is the only function in the body that is under autonomic and voluntary control. Now, I think in one of the seminars that we have had earlier, I've spoken little more about it, but then I'll explain that concept once again here. Basically, our nervous system has two divisions. One that controls whatever can be controlled by me. Okay, I'm talking to you, I'm making gestures. All this can be controlled. Okay, but there are a lot of other activities that cannot be controlled by me. When I'm talking to you, my heart is beating and I have absolute no control on it. There is digestion happening in my body and I have no control over it. So these functions which are beyond my control are called as the autonomic functions. Okay, they happen automatically. Your brain knows how to regulate them. Breathing is the only physiological function, it's the only function in the body which remains autonomic till you take charge of it. Okay, if you don't really start looking at your breathing, it happens on its own. But if you really want to control, you can control it. Okay, and that's the beauty that we're talking about. So if I want to control my heartbeats, I cannot control my heartbeat, so I start controlling breathing because that is in my hands. Okay, so I'm anxious and my heart is racing. What do? I naturally start taking a few deep breaths. Okay, that's a natural response that is generated by nature. But in pranayama, we take a very voluntary, conscious control on our breathing, manipulate the breath, and then achieve, an absolute control on a lot of these autonomic functions.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about what you said earlier, the controlled breathing and how it's related to the stress.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we are stressed, one of the things that happens is our breathing becomes shallow. We start breathing very short. There is irregular pattern of breathing. We are not really in a very smooth, comfortable pattern of breathing, and it is absolutely an unaware, unconscious process of breathing, right?
Yeah,
Now, what happens because of this is it actually amplifies stress. It increases stress. Okay, so it may have begun because of a stressful situation, but it is, you know, putting it in a vicious cycle. So if you want to stop stress, you will have to control your breath. Okay, and also what we understand today is what is called as the impact of the stress on the body. We are talking of what is called as psychosomatic disorders. We're talking of how mind body interaction happens. And breath is an absolute connecting medium. All right. So if you want to control your mind, you will have to start controlling your breathing. So what do you start doing is very simple. You start taking long, deep breaths. Okay, and that itself could be a very simple practice. In our homes, when we used to have a fight with a family member, they would say, just go out, take a few deep breaths and come back and then talk to me. That is because that is the power of your breathing. You start doing deep breathing and your mind calms down. All right, and it is absolutely with awareness. You cannot do long deep breaths without awareness. Okay, if you have seen children, they breathe through tummy. Okay, but almost every adult starts breathing through the chest. They start breathing uh, shallow. So if you want to revert back to a childlike mind, a very peaceful, happy mind, you will have to start controlling your breathing. Of course,
that's yeah.
what we understand from the scriptures again is how this mind-body connection is seen. I think the first line is a verse from Hatha Yoga, which talks of how chale vate chalam chittam nischale nischalam bhavet, and that is identified by yogis. Now, what it means is very simple. Chala is to move. Okay, vata is the breath. So as the breath flows, so does the mind. So if you want to control your mind, start controlling your breathing. Very, very simply put. And that is what is utilized by yoga practitioners in the form of pranayama to take a voluntary control on the physical functions as well as to take voluntary control on the mind, which is absolutely beyond your control otherwise. That is what we do. Of course, when you do that, it leads to a prolonged and healthy life. It's not just adding years to your life, it's adding value to your life. Okay, and that is again something that we understand, and it absolutely helps you to manage stress at a great extent.
So all right, this is beautiful. So how do we do pranayama? That's the next question. And what are, so let's talk about the demo part of the pranayama.
Yeah, we will be doing that.
Okay, all
Basically,
right.
uh, the there are two phases of breathing that we all the time talk about, inhalation and exhalation. But yoga adds another dimension to it, saying holding of breath. Okay. But uh, unless you are physically fit and you're getting trained under a teacher, what we call as gurus, who understand you thoroughly, I would not recommend you holding of breath. Okay, I'll tell you why that is important. But then there are various patterns of breathing that are being elaborated in the scriptures of yoga, where you talk of how do you inhale, how do you exhale, in what patterns do you do that, whether you breathe in through one nostril, breathe out through another, or you breathe in through mouth and breathe out through nose, etc. So there are lots of variations that are being spoken about. Okay, but what we also talk about in pranayama, there are certain simple things that everybody can do, but advanced pranayama, where there is holding of breath and all of that, it must be done under a trained practitioner who would understand you, your nature, and then recommend what is good for you. And that is because I think in the next slide I've put that. Yeah. Basically, we all have the electrical connections in the house. Yeah. And it is supposed to take say X amount of some voltage of current passing through it. But if there is a sudden surge in electricity, it can hamper the electrical equipments in the house, right? So therefore, what do we have? We have the fuse as a protective mechanism. Yeah. What we're talking about in pranayama is I start regulating the energy that I have already inherent in me. But if there is a sudden surge and I'm not prepared to handle that energy, it can lead to a lot of problems. Okay, and that can lead to an imbalance, that can lead to some health problems, and therefore I said, the advanced pranayamas must be practiced under a trained practitioner. It should not be in the form of webinars because your guru will never know what your body is capable of, and therefore that is very important. Also, we talk of the preparation of the practice of pranayama has to be done through body purification, that is done through the cleansing processes that are described in yoga, which are called as kriyas. We have got jalaneti and sutraneti, essentially to clean the nasal passage. We've got kapalabhati, which is one of the very famous yogic practices across, you know, which is to breathe out rapidly. It's called the breath of fire also, and the hyperventilatory practice also. So that is a cleansing process again for respiration, to prepare yourself for getting more uh, better energy. The body has to become stable. Okay, and that is done through the physical postures. And what we understand is, even if it is not necessary that you have to sit on floor cross-legged in a meditative posture or anything, but whichever position you are in, you probably would like to sit on a chair, no problem, but be steady, and your back, your neck should be erect whenever you are doing pranayama, and the breath has to become slow, smooth, steady, and uniform. So these are the preparatory practices for pranayama, and then we will definitely jump into the actual techniques of pranayama.
Okay. So let's get into the techniques, because the way I understand, the way you were explaining, is prepare your body first, whether doing Kapalbhati or any other techniques that we'll you let us know, and then the
Yeah.
second part is doing yoga asanas, and then the third part is the actual pranayama. So so that's how the sequence should go, in a proper way, to do the pranayama in a correct way,
Yeah.
right?
So what we would do for probably the benefit of your viewers today is do some simple things which do not really require that kind of preparation, which can help you to easily calm down your mind. We can do that without real much preparation, but there are certain things that are very important to be remembered whenever we are going for the practice of pranayama. Number one, your stomach must be empty. Okay. So you should either do it early in the morning before you eat anything, or you should do it at least 2 to 3 hours after you have any major meal. And that is because the energy is diverted to digestion when we eat food. Okay. And it cannot really get distributed evenly when you're doing pranayama otherwise. So essentially, one, you will have to have empty stomach. Second, once you learn the practice, highly recommended is that you close your eyes while doing it. Okay. Because what we understand is about 60 to 80% of all the impulses that go to our brain, the sensory impulses, go from the eyes. So in pranayama, the objective is to go inwards, right? So you close your window to outside world and then start looking in, focus on your breathing. That will help you to calm your mind down. That will help you to achieve better benefits of pranayama. The third thing I already spoke, sit down, keeping your back and neck erect while doing the practice of pranayama. So with that basic understanding, of course, you should have a comfortable clothing. You should not be too tight belts and all of that. So that will restrict the free movement of breath, and therefore you should have very comfortable clothing. Uh, so these are the basic practice things. Also, you should be in a comfortable environment to do it. Your room where you're doing it should be very well ventilated. Ideally, if you can do that in a place that is shown in the picture, in a natural environment, nothing better than that. But then at least your room must be very well ventilated. So those are the basic uh, preparations that I would highly recommend for anybody who would like to do even the simplest of the practices. Now, during pranayama techniques, we have various ways of doing it. We manipulate the speed of breathing to start with. There are practices where we breathe fast, right? The practice of Kapalabhati, which is not a pranayama, it's a cleansing technique, but then essentially it's a breathing practice. So we are also talking about it here, is a practice where you're breathing fast. There is another practice called Bhastrika, where you start breathing fast. But most of the other practices, you start breathing slowly, okay? And you breathe slower than usual, okay? And that is going to be the key. Also with Kapalabhati and Bhastrika, why do we do it? I mentioned that you breathe fast, you will probably end up like, your lifespan is going to reduce. No, not that way. At the end of the practice of Kapalabhati, which you do for a minute, your respiratory passage is so clean that you automatically switch to a slower breath after that. So that is the basic concept and idea behind doing it. There is a lot of nostril manipulation that we talk about in yoga. Uh, Essentially, while talking of the nadis, I spoke of Surya Nadi, which was represented by the right nostril, Chandra Nadi, which is represented by the left nostril. And there has to be balance, is again something that I said. So there is nostril manipulation that we talk about. There is alternate nostril breathing, there is uni-nostril breathings. We talk of all of that in yoga. Then we also include chanting. You were mentioning about Omkara. There is also a practice called as Brahmari, where we create humming sound like a honeybee, okay, while breathing out. So we breathe in, and while breathing out, we make a sound like a honeybee. So that will create a lot of resonance in the facial region in the brain, which will help you to perceive the small little stimuli that happen. Then there are practices where you open your mouth, breathe in through mouth, and breathe out through nose. So there are different practices that are elaborated in the yogic scriptures.
Okay. Let's move on to the benefits of doing pranayama.
Well,
That's the
this
most
is
important part, which we've been talking about this actually all throughout your session, that you've been talking about how it can help, live a better life. But I think to summarize, if you can just talk a
absolutely. I
little.
mean, uh, there are multiple benefits of pranayama, and there are close to 1,000+ research publications on pranayama. I myself contributed to the area by my own research. What we understand is that, I mean, these 6 points are basically the summary of what all pranayama can do to you. It can enhance your cognitive abilities, meaning cognition is basically the process of perceiving a stimulus, processing in your brain, and reacting to it. So the whole process of learning, the whole process of concentration, attention, grasping the sensory stimuli, and reacting to your external environment is the process of cognition. So if you do pranayama, what is known is you can perceive the external stimuli in a much refined manner and respond to them much quickly. Okay, and this has been also identified with special children who are slow learners. Okay, even in them the cognitive abilities are really lowered. Even in them the cognitive abilities are enhanced by practice of pranayama. There are studies about it. The second thing that we understand is the metabolism, the chemical processes. I think the previous session we spoke about it also. uh, the chemical processes that happen in the body are all regulated by different hormones, which can get affected whenever we are stressed. So if I'm breathing right, my stress levels are under my control, automatically my hormones will be under my control, and the metabolism will be absolutely fine. So it helps you to have a wonderful, beautiful internal environment in the body. Of course, the respiration is always connected with your heart. Okay. And it gives you a better cardiorespiratory health. It can prevent a lot of heart diseases and all of that. Of course, it brings balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which are the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic one is the one that gets activated whenever we are stressed. So if you want to get away from stress and relax, which is the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, pranayama helps you to do that. It also has, through its reduction of the oxidative stress, which is the chemical stress, not the psychological stress, it can help you to age slowly. Okay, so it is anti-aging, and who doesn't want to be young? Everybody
I think
wants to remain.
I think you can trademark your pranayama and tell the whole world to look younger, so everyone will come for sure. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, this is a yogic wisdom. I mean, nobody has
Yes.
a trademark on it. It's just, the tradition that we have understood. Our ancestors have understood it. It's our job just to spread the good word to people and help them in their health.
Okay. So would we do a little bit of a demo? You think we have
Absolutely,
time?
absolutely. You tell me how much time we have
Yeah,
and
so
how
we have
many techniques.
people in Zoom. If there are any questions, I see participants in Zoom. If you have any questions, we are open for question and answer as well. We can spend a couple of minutes, or you know, I think that's perfectly fine. Before that, if anyone wants to reach out to about this particular session, we've already written our email and our website. We are coming up with more detailed classes, the group workshops in October. We will let all of you know. And with that, I would have Dr. Apar give a small demo of a minute or so.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the simple things that you could do is remember, I think there is some question in the chat box.
Oh, let me see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did not see it. Okay. So someone is asking, what would you suggest for a daily practice?
Yeah, I think we will be doing that right away.
Okay, great.
So, one of the simple practices that you could actually do is deep abdominal breathing. You don't really have to do any preparation for it, and benefits a lot. Uh, there are studies which tell that it will help you to reduce your blood pressure very quickly, even in patients with high blood pressure. Okay, so all you need to do is please sit straight. However, you are probably you could be sitting on a chair. You could also be sitting on a floor, cross-legged, no problem. Just sit straight. Okay, and place your hands on your knees. And all you need to do is focus your attention on your breathing. Maybe it would help to keep a hand on your tummy, just one hand you can place on your tummy. And while we do so, just observe what happens to your tummy as you breathe in and out. And now I want you to synchronize your breathing with the movement of your abdomen. I want you to essentially push your hand out, bulging the abdomen as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, sink it inwards. Breathe in and breathe out as slow and deep as you can. Simple, effortless, relaxed, calm breathing. Your focus remains on your breathing. While breathing in, the abdomen bulges out. While breathing out, it sinks in. Whenever you are stressed, whenever you are uncomfortable, you can do this practice very, very easily. This will help you. Another practice is the alternate nostril breathing. There are a lot of variations of it, but I'll teach you a simple one. Okay. So I told you that there is a positive and negative energy that we're talking about. So there has to be a balance, and that balance is brought by what is called as alternate nostril breathing. So all you need to do is use your right hand, okay, and fold your index and middle fingers. Okay, so this will be the position. Yes. Okay. So now turn the palm towards you. Yeah. So you will have your thumb towards your right nostril and the other two fingers next to your other left nostril. So now how do we use this? I'll just show you once, and then I will instruct you for the practice as well. So what you need to do is basically breathe in and then close the right nostril through the thumb, breathe out through left, breathe in through left, and then close your left nostril, breathe out through right. Breathe in through right and breathe out through left. Okay, so the cycle is very simple. What you do is the nostril that you have breath in, you breathe out through opposite. The nostril through which you have taken breath out, you breathe in through the same and then continue to go opposite. So all you need to do is use your fingers to change the nostril. Please make sure that you bring your hand to the nose and not take your nose to the hand. Okay, so your neck should remain erect, number one. Number two, don't put too much force. Okay, just gentle closure of the tip of your nostril. All right. So we will do this for a couple of rounds together. Breathe out through both the nostrils and then close the right nostril. Breathe in through left. Close the left nostril. Breathe out through right. Breathe in through right. Close the right nostril. Breathe out through left. This is one round. Once again, breathe in through left. Breathe out through right. Breathe in through right. Breathe out through left. So this particular practice is called as Nadi Shuddhi Pranayama. Nadi are the subtle channels, and I told you these are two channels that we're talking about. Shuddhi, the word Shuddhi can be inferred as cleansing generally, but it also means to bring balance. Okay, so the word Nadi Shuddhi means to bring balance between the positive and negative energy that we have, the solar and lunar energy that we have on both the nostrils. So we alternate the breath between the two nostrils in this particular practice. This can be done by anybody unless you start holding the breath. Okay, there are also variations where you hold the breath, but I would not recommend that without the guidance of a proper teacher. So otherwise, anybody and everybody can do this particular practice, found to be very safe, very effective, and very useful. Absolutely, I mean, anybody can do this.
So this particular one that you talked about, the Nadi Shodhana, it does, we can do it without the Kriya process. You talked about earlier about the Kriya process of preparing your body, but this can be done without it.
This can be done without it, but the benefit of it is going to be much more if you're doing it with cleansing of the body. Okay.
Sure.
So it is like, you know, you do get benefit of it, but you know, the benefits are much more when we are doing it.
We follow the whole process as you talked about.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. With that thought in mind, any other questions from any of the audience? Any who are attending via Zoom or even FB Live? Before we wrap up, we are almost at the hour. Okay. I do want to say that we are coming up with group workshops, which we will be letting everyone know. Please let us know the feedback of our sessions. Please help us spread the word and share our sessions. These are very, very informational sessions, educational sessions, and hope you like them. With that, I'd like to wrap up this session. Any final thoughts from you, Dr. Apar, before I wrap up?
I think all of us keep breathing all the time. It's just the way we have to breathe. If we can modify that.
We breathe like a turtle. That's the
Absolutely, you know, switch to that and have wonderful, healthy, comfortable life. It would definitely help you to, you know, manage your stress, because that is something that all of us are subjected to these days. So just work on your breath and it will help you to take care of everything else.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to think of the turtle every time I breathe. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. With that, I'd like to wrap up this session. Have a great weekend, all of you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Bye-bye. Namaste.